us right now. Hans von Spakovsky, he's the senior legal fellow at Advancing American Freedom, and he has forgotten more about election law that most people know in this country. And now our regular, if not permanent, legal advisor here on the program. Hans, thanks for joining us, and thanks for picking up Joe DeGeneva's mantle.
Well, sure, and I'm glad you're on camera. Although it means now I have to put on a suit and tie. I can't do your show in my pajamas like I usually do.
That's right. Anyone listening on the network or at WMAL in Washington, you can watch us on Salem News Channel as well. That's on Roku and Samsung TV and wherever you like to stream your stuff. But Hans, come on. We all figured that you go to bed in a suit and tie. You're just that kind of guy. You're always well-tailored. And in fact, well, I saw you at the Kentucky Derby. We're going to talk to you about the Kentucky Derby a little bit later.
Okay.
But first, if you could give us amazing. Listen, if you can give us an update on Virginia, especially because I know, especially our WMAL listeners in the greater Washington area, but honestly, this affects everyone nationwide when it comes to the midterm elections. As of now, that election, the referendum that would redraw these districts in favor of Democrats, like radically in favor of Democrats, and disenfranchise Republicans in the Commonwealth of Virginia to the tune of losing four of their five remaining seats in the House of Representatives. That still has not been certified. The Supreme Court of Virginia has said, do not certify this election yet. What does that tell you about this legal process, Hans?
Well, there was an injunction issued by one of the county courts. The state asked the Supreme Court to stay it, basically suspend that injunction. They refused to do it. They heard the case a week ago. That is the state Supreme Court. So we're now waiting for a decision. But the fact that they refused to stay it, I think, probably gives hope to those who sued. The issue basically is that the speed with which the Democrats passed this referendum in the legislature, because the state says you have to first pass a referendum to change the Constitution in the General Assembly twice, and then it goes to the voters. But in essence, what the lower court said is you didn't follow the proper procedures. You didn't give notice to voters. There wasn't a complete intervening election in between because early voting had already started. If the state Supreme Court enforces the Constitution, well, then the referendum will be null and void. But will they do that? I don't know the answer to that.
You know, there's some suggestion that they won't follow the Constitution because, unlike the United States Supreme Court, these positions on the Virginia Supreme Court, they are term limited out. And it's not the governor who reappoints them. It's this very same legislature that these justices would be basically undermining and spanking. So in other words, they'll set aside the jurisprudence. They'll set aside the Constitution just to keep their jobs.
Well, that is a real problem, and that's a real defect in the way Virginia works under its Constitution. Basically, they have a very strong General Assembly, and the judges across the state are subject to the jurisdiction of the state legislature. So I think, unfortunately, that sometimes influences them the wrong way.
Hans, there are a lot of people who look at this argument right now before the Supreme Court of Virginia and the proponents, the Democrats, who want this redistricting to happen. They want to disenfranchise all of these Southern voters and rural voters and lower income voters. Right. They want them to be subject to the wealthy few in Fairfax that live within like a 5-mile radius. They say, oh, this is just a procedural thing. That it's not really important when this legislative session happened and the fact that there were already votes coming in. That's just the fine print. That's just dotting I's and crossing T's. Is that really what this amounts to? It just happens to be a procedural thing that shouldn't stand in the way of all the millions of voters that voted for this? Or is there a real reason, a legitimate reason why that provision is in there?
Yeah, this is not just a procedural thing because they're amending the Constitution. Remember, in order to do this, they have to approve getting rid of the independent redistricting commission that the Democrats, actually put in a couple of years ago in the state constitution. Those procedural safeguards are there so that what just happened doesn't happen. you get a rush to get a constitutional amendment passed. That's not like passing a law in the legislature that can be easily changed by a subsequent legislature. The Constitution is basically the permanent governing structure of the state. So the procedural safeguards are there so that you have a considered, measured process for changing that Constitution.
Speaking with Hans von Spakovsky, our legal analyst, and he's a specialist, by the way. I didn't really give the full resume, Hans, but you actually worked in the Justice Department, in the Civil Rights Division, specifically on election law, and you've actually served in various state bodies and county bodies. In fact, you were part of the famous Fulton County Election Commission, weren't you?
Yeah, although I try to forget that these days, given the controversy surrounding them in the last few elections.
Understandable. So, listen, I'm loath to make you predict exactly how the Virginia Supreme Court might rule on this thing. But at the very least, can you give us your prediction about when they might rule? Because the clock is ticking here. The primaries. I was at an event in Prince William County, Virginia on Saturday, and a bunch of guys came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm running for the Republican primary in Virginia 7." And I was like, which Virginia 7? How do you do that exactly?
Right. Oh, I think we're going to get a decision very quickly. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it came out this week, next week at the most, because they know that the time is ticking. We have primaries coming up, and they've got to get their decision out. I mean, that's the same reason, we heard from the Supreme Court last week on the redistricting case out of Louisiana. They came out with it because they know the election clock is moving rapidly towards November.
Yeah, and to that end, last week we saw Florida go ahead with their new map, which basically, even if Virginia goes through, Florida just negated what Virginia did. You've got Alabama now. Governor Ivey has ordered a special session. Louisiana, of course, which was at the center of the Supreme Court decision, they've postponed the primaries so that they can work on a new map. South Carolina, Tennessee also looking at it. Let's first start with those states who have affirmatively said, yeah, we're going to go forward. How does that look now? Will they be able to do it?
Well, it depends. Florida's primary is until August, so they actually had more time to change their congressional map. Tennessee is the same. Tennessee's primary is until August, so they've got time. Now, Florida's the big prize, as you know, 27 congressional seats, of which 7 were Democratic seats. Tennessee is now in session. There it's 8-1, 1 Democratic seat, so that wouldn't be that big of a pickup. Alabama is 5 Republican seats, 2 Democratic seats, so that would also be a pickup. What's interesting about the Alabama special session, which just started on Sunday, is that everybody's talking about congressional seats, but Alabama governor actually called them into session to redraw also their state Senate seats, because the Calais decision from the Supreme Court, it applies to all legislative seats. So this is it's going to have a big effect potentially in Congress, but it also may have a big effect with state legislatures.
Well, and for all the crocodile tears about how this is disenfranchising and this is, a power grab from Republicans, really all they're doing is making the southeastern portion of this country that is pretty damn solid Republican and red, they're making it look just as solid blue and Democrat as New England and the Northeast, right? That's really tantamount to what's happening here.
Right. No, that's exactly right. In essence, Republicans are doing what Democrats have been doing for a long time. I mean, look at Massachusetts, where I think Donald Trump got close to 40% of the vote. There are 0 Republican congressional seats there because they completely gerrymandered the state. The Democrats did. So Republicans are just kind of playing catch up with that.
And for everyone who says that Republicans started this, you mentioned Massachusetts gerrymandered. I believe it was Massachusetts that had the very first gerrymandered district named after their governor. Governor Jerry, or Governor Gary, I guess is really his name. Yeah, that's hilarious. Real fast, I know that there's a lot of pressure on Governor Kemp of Georgia to redistrict that state. It's an important state in the South, and you know Georgia pretty well. He says that he can't do it because the election cycle has already begun. Is that the case, or could he suspend things and redraw, in your opinion?
No, what they could do is call a special session, and the legislature just has to do what Alabama is doing. Remember, Alabama's primary is supposed to be May 19th. So they not only have to redistrict, they have to suspend and move the primary to a later date. And I think the Georgia legislature could do the same thing. They could say, we're changing the date of the primary to later in the summer, August, even early September. So I'm not quite sure why he's hesitating to do that.
Yeah, I'm not either, and I'm sure our listeners in Atlanta are confused by it too. And I hope they keep the pressure on Governor Kemp. It always seems like Governor Kemp has one foot on the right side of a decision or an argument, and then he's always just sort of, tiptoeing into the dark side, the side that's like, oh no, we couldn't possibly do that. Be bold, Governor Kemp. Let's go. There's too much at stake. Listen, real fast, I'd love for you to dive in. We're going to keep Ivan Spakovsky for one more segment because there's more to get to. But this whole idea of who started it, I thought this was resolved. I thought everybody knew what really happened in Texas and the fact that this wasn't just Texas deciding mid-cycle to start redistricting. But I saw Democrats on the talking shows over the weekend without any pushback from the host saying the same thing, that Republicans started it in Texas. Can you just give us quickly the origins of why Texas redrew the maps?
Because of a decision coming out of the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals that had to do with the Voting Rights Act and that overturned a 30-year-old precedent. That's what led to this.
Yeah. And the map, my understanding is they tried to put the map through in 2020 at the proper time. It was the Biden Justice Department that blocked it, right? They were the ones that held this up for a few years.
Yeah, that's right. And remember, the whole Louisiana Calais decision everybody's complaining about, the reason that came to the Supreme Court was because of Democrats initiating a lawsuit to force a second district.
Yeah. All right. We're going to stick with Hans von Spakovsky. We want to get his analysis on the Comey indictment and some new news from Acting Attorney General Blanche about that indictment. Also, someone in New Jersey, a Democrat, was just arrested for doing the thing that I'm told never happens with falsifying voter registration. Hans will tell us about that, too, and that amazing Kentucky Derby he saw firsthand. Good morning. O'Connor and Company continues here on this Monday morning from your nation's capital. Larry O'Connor here with our legal analyst, Hans von Spakovsky, advancing American freedom. And Hans, we're going to get to your time at the Kentucky Derby in a minute because you did see a legendary race. They're already making movies about this. They're writing the screenplays, and I can't wait to see them. But real fast, still in the election law arena, which really is your wheelhouse and expertise. You've been writing some op-eds over at our site, PJ Media, part of the Town Hall Media family, haven't you?
Yeah, no, I have. I have special loyalty to PJ. They published some of my first op-eds many years ago.
There you go. We get only the best in the Town Hall Media family. I saw this story out in New Jersey. The New York Post wrote it up over the weekend, and I was very confused, Hans, because I was told that this never happens. This is the kind of thing that no one needs to worry about. It has to do with forging voter registrations. You know, the same voter registrations that the Save America Act would ensure allows only for U.S. citizens and people who can prove their citizenship to register to vote. Well, this guy, Henrylin Ibazim, former Democrat mayoral candidate in New Jersey, pled guilty. So he's already said, yeah, you betcha, I did it, I'm guilty. Pled guilty to forging about 1,000 voter registration applications during the 2021 Democratic primary. So Hans, make this make sense. I thought that this doesn't happen, that Republicans who want the Save America Act are just chasing their own tail. They're trying to divide this country. Forget about the fact that over 80% of Americans think this is a reasonable thing to ask. Hans, does this happen more than we hear about in the news?
Yes, and New Jersey and New York have a really bad history of this kind of thing. I mean, there have been multiple convictions in those states of people, including candidates and political party activists, for doing what? They register voters, sometimes fake registrations, other times of real people, but without telling those people they're registering them to vote. And then what do? They request absentee ballots in their names and fill them out and submit them. And Look, about a decade ago in Troy, New York, there were actually convictions there, including of a political consultant. Who were they targeting? People in poor urban neighborhoods. And when they were asked, well, why did they go there? They said, well, these are the people who probably won't notice that we registered them to vote and voted in their name and were least likely to complain. So it's the urban poor, the constituents of Democrats really who are usually targeted by this.
They're targeted and exploited. That's what they're doing, and they're stealing their votes. And obviously that's why you would do it. There's no other reason to forge 1,000 applications and registrations to vote unless you plan on getting those ballots and then basically stuffing the ballot box. Now, extrapolate that to a state like Oregon or California, where they have automatic mail-in ballots. So you don't even have to request it for absentee. You're just going to automatically get a ballot for that election. It's like a slam dunk. Is that why those states continue to trend more Democrat? Because basically Democrats are gaming the system.
Yeah, I think so. And keep in mind that, you know, one of the only security measures they have, right, or security for absentee ballots is signature comparison. And what's going on right now? Democrats have filed lawsuits, I think in about half a dozen states, saying signature comparison should be gotten rid of because it's discriminatory. So they even want to get rid of that last security measure.
So not
for
even
mail-in ballot.
Not even photo ID. Not even. I mean, they've already got rid of photo ID. Now they don't even want you to be able to compare signatures. That's absolute insanity. Right. Hans, quickly, I'm going to get to Attorney General or Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. He said that this Comey indictment that was handed down by a grand jury in North Carolina actually is about a lot more than just the 8647 Instagram post. Do you know anything about that? Or do you have any hunch as to where this might be going?
Well, Blanche said they have witnesses and documents, but then he wouldn't say what they were. Well, I hope he's got a lot more than he's got because, look, I don't like the former head of the FBI. I think he abused his powers for partisan political reasons. But the indictment so far, what we've heard about it, I think it strays into First Amendment territory, and I don't think they really have a criminal case. So whatever other evidence he said would be key to them actually having a case with merit against him.
Well, we'll keep an eye out for that. So, Hans, finally, I was at the Virginia Gold Cup races this week, a guest of Daniel Turner from Power of the Future. We had a blast over there. And then I get this photo on my phone from you, Hans. Let's take a quick look at it if we can, if you're watching on Salem News Channel. You know, we hear this lilting, sugary, sweet Southern accent on you, Hans. We know you're a Southern gentleman, but there you are at the Kentucky Derby. How many mint juleps are you into by this point? You look like you're feeling no pain there at the Derby.
I'm not going to admit or deny how many mint juleps I have. They do come in special glasses. They come in special glasses, and we do now have a nice collection of those at our house.
Oh, so it's not your first. See, this is a bucket list thing for me, but you saw a legendary race. Did you have money on Golden Tempo?
I did not. My wife and I both lost, but the people we were there with, an old friend of mine, his wife, she picked the winner. And the odds, it was a come from behind. I don't know how much she won, but she did very well on that race.
Absolute bedlam, and the first woman trainer, and two brother jockeys finished first and second. This has Hollywood written all over it, and I cannot wait for it. What an incredible race. Golden Tempo from behind. Hans, great talking with you. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.